Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. My name is Rebecca Shankman, and I am the director of the McDonald Center for Obesity Prevention and Education. And we are very happy to co-host tonight's event with the college's Center for Global and Public Health. So thank you for being here tonight. Tonight we will hear from leaders of our community who are working on the front lines of the pressing public health problem of food insecurity. And they will be discussing the challenges and offering solutions to the concerns of addressing both hunger and health within this issue. Access to healthy food is a basic human right, and yet hunger is directly linked to poorer health outcomes and remains a barrier to health, education, work, productivity, equality, economic development, and a sense of well-being. We hope that you'll leave here tonight with a better understanding of how you can take action in your own community to ensure access to real healthy food for all who need it. We're asking that everyone save their questions to the end of both presentations, where we'll have our speakers come up here and can address your questions then. And before we start, I just have a few housekeeping slides to go through. So our speakers tonight, Wendy Gaynor from the Chester County Food Bank, and Patrick Walsh and Ellie Wenger from the Martha's Choice Marketplace of Catholic Social Services in Norristown and Montgomery County. The objectives for tonight's event are to develop an understanding of how threats to food security undermine public health, and to examine the opportunities for food programs to comprehensively promote wellness and community. And for those who are here in the audience and who are receiving continuing ed credits, either contact hours for nurses or continuing professional education units for dietitians, you will receive 2 contact hours or 2 CPEUs for attending the event tonight. And an evaluation will be sent to the email you used to register for the event. And once the evaluation is complete, you will receive a certificate. And if you have any difficulties, please don't hesitate to reach out. As protocol, we just wanted to let everyone know that Villanova University, Fitzpatrick College of Nursing, Continuing Education, and COPE is a continuing professional educator accredited provider with a commission on dietetic registration, and Villanova Fitzpatrick College of Nursing is accredited as a provider of continuing nursing education by the American Nurses Credentialing Center Commission on Accreditation. And accredited status does not imply endorsement by Villanova, COPE, ANCC, or CDR of any commercial products or medical nutrition advice displayed in conjunction with an activity. And the presenters and planners have no conflict of interest to disclose, but this event will be monitored for and evaluated for any commercial bias, and if anyone feels that there is any, you can say so in the evaluation, and we will address that. And before we introduce our first speaker, Wendy, I did want to introduce Elizabeth Pettit-Dimage, who will just talk for a couple minutes about a personal experience as it relates to the topic. So thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming out on such a cold evening. Really appreciate that. I teach in the College of Nursing. I teach courses related to health promotion and community health and global health issues. So I'm going to start today by telling you it's my 68th birthday today. And I can't think of a better place to be. I could, but not really. Truthfully not, because it has given me some time to reflect on what's happened in my life that has made me impassioned about this particular topic. So, I stress in my courses the importance of historical context to understand where we are today and why we do things and why we should or should not do certain things in terms of public health. Every year I get older, and every year you tend to, those of you who are getting older, you'll find out that you reminisce more often and you reflect on your life to see, are you where you should be today? And have you done everything you can do to make life better for other people in addition to yourself? So you reflect on important milestones in your life and how they impact down today. I took notes so I don't ramble, because that's the other thing that happens when you get to be 68. I could reminisce for about 3 hours. So I'm just going to take a walk down memory lane a little bit, back to the 1950s. And yes, I can remember back that far. To the mid-1950s, going from 55 to probably 57, 58. My father worked for Westinghouse, which was a major manufacturer, industrial employer at that time. And Chester, which is the city I grew up in, was a major industrial hub. I grew up on the east side of Chester, and I didn't have any sense of that it was a working class neighborhood. Were we an at-risk neighborhood? Were we a vulnerable neighborhood? We were just the neighborhood. So during the 1950s, there were a lot of labor movements taking place, and my father was on, there was one year at the time, I didn't know it, but it was a year where they were on strike for close to 18 months. And that strike wasn't just affecting my father, it affected many other families in our community. And what were they fighting for? They were fighting for better wages, better working conditions, and health benefits, because there was no such thing at that time. Everybody carried a tab for you. Your doctor carried a tab, the bread man carried a tab, the milkman carried a tab. Who didn't carry a tab? The water company, the electric company, phone. Well, we didn't have a telephone, so that was a good thing. I couldn't get turned off at the time. So, you know, from the age of like 5 to 7, I had no idea what was taking place. I just remember the lady next door who was on welfare, that I didn't know at the time, that's what it was, shared with us giant blocks of orange cheese, giant boxes of oatmeal that didn't have the man with the black hat on it. Didn't mean anything to me. All I knew was those great grilled cheese sandwiches and cans of Campbell tomato soup for lunch when we came home, walked home from school, were awesome. That big pot of oatmeal in the morning, doctored up with something that was not butter, it was oleo, I'm not sure what it was. Had some orange dye poured in it to make it look like margarine, and a little bit of sugar on it. Those meals were the greatest meals ever, and I have really fond memories of those meals. I can tell you that growing up, me and my brothers and sisters were all anemic because there was very little protein in the house. Everybody in the neighborhood was really in the same situation, but as a child, I didn't know that. I just knew if I went to my neighbor's house and was playing with that neighbor, we were all offered peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on some truly white bread that had no fiber or grains in it, right? But it was delicious. There was a garden in a field that we used to play in that all the Italians in the neighborhood had their own gardens there. And in hard times, they would come and share, basically have a farmer's market with us, but they would come and bring us and give us their fruits and vegetables to the neighborhood kids. I remember sitting in our home where the women's sewing club, which were all the women in the neighborhood, got together when the kids went to school and darned pants and socks, etc., and they called themselves a sewing club. But what we would do is make up food baskets for everybody else in the neighborhood. And then it was our job as children to go out after supper, after dark, and put them on people's porches so that they didn't know who gave them those food baskets. Because some families didn't just have 5 children, some had 11 children. Some were elderly people that didn't have any income. There were no safety nets at that time. There were no food stamps. There were no food banks. When we went to school, went to Catholic school, every Friday we probably could get a nickel to buy a soft pretzel, as you could buy. But instead of buying pretzels, we were asked to give that 5 cents to support the missions in other countries for children that were hungry and needed clothing. So as children, we had no sense that we were poor. Our sense was somebody else was poor and needed support. So my point I could go on for hours with what else I remember, but that particular issue, in light of what we're going to talk about tonight and the experts are going to talk about tonight, as to where have we come to from the 1950s to 2019, where we still have so many people who cannot feed their children. If we hadn't had that neighborhood support, I don't know how I would have gone to school and made it through the day or walked to and from school. I actually don't know that now as an adult. And I don't know what impact that had on my parents. Did they feel shame getting that food from the neighbor? Were they embarrassed? I don't know, because they never shared that with us. So I'm looking forward to hearing the experts today, as you are, as to where have we come, what are we going to do, and what is our responsibility as the public and as, I don't know how many nurses are here today, but as the nursing profession, what are we going to do about the current situation that we're faced with? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I want to introduce Wendy Gaynor, who will be our first speaker tonight. And Wendy is the Director of Food Security Initiatives and works for the Chester County Food Bank. She's on the board of Green Allies and is a member of the Chester County ACES Coalition, the Southern Chester County Opportunity Network, and the Bridges Out of Poverty Initiative. Her past work experiences include designing new programs at Broad Street Ministry in Philadelphia, managing markets at Heaven's Harvest Farm in Massachusetts, and rapid rehousing with the Pottstown Cluster of Religious Communities. Wendy received a BA in Communications from Westchester University and an MA, a Master's in Organizational Leadership from Eastern University. Thank you, Wendy. We're excited to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you to Rebecca. Thank you to the Villanova College of Nursing. Thank you to you all for being here on a cold night. And I would also say that I don't know that I am a professional in this. I think maybe you're more of a professional. I'd say that there are folks who have lived the struggle of maybe in and out of food insecurity in their lives, and those folks are really the professionals, and we've learned so much by doing a lot of studying and learning from them. So that's what I'll say. I think I've learned a little bit, and so I'll share what I've learned this evening with you. First, I want to ask you if you know what today is. Anybody? Anna, you're not allowed. Anybody know what today is? You know. Do you know what today is? No? It's National Hot Chocolate Day. So in light of that, no, I did not bring hot chocolate for everyone, but I brought a couple jokes. Maybe hot chocolate wants to be called beautiful chocolate once in a while. The second one I have set up for you, Jimmy Fallon. I never stay awake late enough to watch him, but once in a while he'll do these thank you notes. And this one I particularly loved. Thank you, hot chocolate, for being a great way to pretend I'm drinking coffee when I'm actually drinking a candy. I like that one. So, thank you, hot chocolate, for all you've given us in this life. That being said, we're going to talk about healthy food tonight. So, I'll give you what I'm going to do is give you a brief history of the Chester County Food Bank. It's only 10 years old. It started right around the little recession we had there in 2008, harder recession, some others would say. Talk about that. I'll talk to you a little bit tonight about how we are developing and have been developing a nutrition framework, how that's informing the work that we're doing. We'll talk about a couple other things too, but we'll start here. Going to quickly go through this. 2009, Chester County Food Bank started during the escalating hunger problem. We really tried to, from the beginning, focus on healthy, real healthy food. They used to call it something that your grandmother would make. So food sort of already grown organically because we really didn't know any different, right? Back in the 50s, 60s, and before that, the organic wasn't a thing. It was, everybody grew, with the organic practices not that long ago, really, in our history. But from the very start, we made sure that the Chester County Food Bank was about the good stuff, about real healthy food, about fresh produce. We support 150 agencies in the community, schools, food cupboards, senior centers, shelters, congregate meal sites, We also work in partnership with local clinics, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that partnership looks like in a bit. So, programs include backpack programs, senior food boxes, summer food boxes, the Fresh Cheese Mobile Market, which is one of the programs that I oversee. We have an Eat Fresh cooking classes, another one. Taste It, that's our food demonstrations that we do around the county. TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and SFPP, which is State Food Purchase Program. We receive funding in order to give out some of those items to pantries. We also have community gardens, and the food distribution is also funded by many of our partners, folks who from the beginning would give us funding, as well as some corporations. We do receive some grant funding, as well as the state and federal money as well. So what's food insecurity? We broadly define this as the lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. We know, and many of you probably in this room also know, that the research indicates that people who experience chronic food insecurity also suffer from obesity, chronic health conditions. There's lower academic achievement. Children really suffer when they don't have access to good food. So think about this question. I don't know if you know who Mark Winnie is, wrote Closing the Food Gap. He asked this question: is the responsibility for what one consumes or otherwise does to oneself, whether positive or negative, the person's responsibility or that of society, culture, advertising, the calculating hand of capitalism, or a host of environmental factors over which we have little control? Anybody have thoughts or opinions on that? So he sort of answers his own question in his work and doesn't really take sides, but he says this: the more I've done this, the more convinced I've become that diet-related health problems, one portion of the food gap, can be controlled by personal behavior, but that the societal, social, political, economic forces bearing down on the most vulnerable and most powerful, and that it takes an abnormally strong and discerning person to overcome them. I think this is very true, and it's what I've seen in the short time in my life that I've been doing this work. I teach Eat Fresh cooking classes, and there's a woman named Nancy who comes to some of the classes, and she comes because she likes to try some of the food. In each of our classes, we make sure to give out a bag of fresh produce at the end of every class, which takes place every other week. Usually lasts people for about that length of time, about 2 weeks. And Nancy comes and she says that she doesn't really use most of the produce because she's used to eating out of a can. And I said, so do you think that you might just try? You know, we made some things here tonight. Why don't you go home and try making that broccoli at home? No, Wendy, I'm used to eating out of a can. It's what I'm going to keep doing. It's what I know. I know what green beans out of a can taste like. I can count on green beans out of a can tasting like that, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. Okay. So changing that behavior is the long work. It's generational work. So food insecurity in Chester County, here are a couple of the numbers. About 43,000, that's an estimation from Feeding America. The 80,000 number we think could be at risk of food insecurity when taking into account Feeding America estimations and along with local data. You can see 26,000 enrolled in SNAP, 44% of food insecure population is eligible for SNAP in Chester County. It should be noted Chester County, Pennsylvania is the wealthiest county in Pennsylvania and pretty up there in the nation as well. We still have about a 7.8% food insecurity poverty rate, and there's still a lot of people struggling. So what we try to help people understand is that food insecurity and poverty, which are very closely connected, are hidden in a place like Chester County. It might be more difficult to find it. It might be harder to see. People might hide it well, but it is there. So starting in 2017 into the early part of 2018, we did a community food security assessment, and in Montgomery County also completed one around the same time. We sought to answer these 4 questions. Who is at the highest risk of food insecurity? To what extent are community resources utilized? What are the barriers contributing to household food insecurity? And what are the attitudes related to real healthy food? among food insecure populations. These are some of the things that we found out. I'm not going to go over all of it with you tonight, but here are a couple things that we found. Maybe not surprisingly to most of you in this room, housing was the #1 reason that many people said that they were food insecure. 67% said that rent and housing was the #1 reason. Utility and bills, medical bills, food is too expensive, disability, transportation, cost of childcare, those were some of the others. And then we also asked the question of the reasons why people that you know, maybe your neighbors, don't come to the food pantries. Many said that they didn't know of anyone, but 31% said they don't have transportation. We also think that the time that some of the agencies are open also creates a barrier. Many of them tend to be open during work hours, maybe they're open once a month. The food pantry in my neighborhood at the North Coventry Food Pantry is open 1 time a month. And, so if you don't catch food at that time, that's really the only time that you have. Results of the pantry experience were overall very good. 90% agree or strongly agree that they were happy with the amount of food that they received. They can choose healthy foods, 82% said. 78% said that they can find foods they eat. We also did focus groups. So we did about 1,200 surveys, 23 focus groups, and a series of stakeholder interviews. The focus group participants expressed high satisfaction with the overall pantry experience. Some were concerned with the nutrition quality. Food preferences. Maybe it's because we did the survey. I don't know, this is one of those issues. But most people said that produce was the #1 item they were looking for. We were a little bit shocked by this because many of our stakeholders said that they believed it was the milk, the cereals, some of those other items. Meat, eggs, and milk were the other 3. Some of the things they did not want: instant meals, desserts, too many baked goods, prepared foods, and canned goods, not as much. So some of the results, some of our takeaways, some of what we already knew to a large extent but needed the information to go with. We know that the high cost of living, disability, and underemployment are some of those barriers. Transportation, stigmas, attitudes, pride, fear of immigration status is something we're also seeing. Folks sort of afraid of ICE and not going to pantries that they used to go to before. So what we know, and I think what many know in this room, is that food insecurity does not exist in a vacuum. It is not separate from the other issues that people are facing. It's not separate from housing. It's not separate from exploitation. It's not separate from a lot of the other things that people have to figure out how to maneuver around and deal with. So as the Chester County Food Bank, we recognize that to do this work and to do the work of long-term going from charity model to the solidarity model with people, that we need to work in collaboration with other organizations and with the people who are experiencing food insecurity in the first place, to come up with a plan together, to have a 20, 30, 40-year plan out, to change our food landscape, to change our food system. How we do that, I don't know exactly, because each community is different. So Coatesville, which is our only city in Chester County, is very different than Honeybrook. It's very different than Kennett Square. It's very different than Phoenixville. It's very different than North Coventry. So each community, what those communities need to look at and tackle together are all going to be different in how they sort of work toward those goals and issues. Because of what I've just described to you, we've now incorporated a food justice model and the work that we're trying to do. Really knowing that collaborative ways forward are the way we have to go. It's inclusive, it's community-led, participatory. It seeks to not exploit people, but invite people to the table. It identifies and acts to remove significant structural inequities. And food justice activists seek to establish healthy, resilient communities with equitable access to nourishing and culturally appropriate foods. Something we think about a lot as well. Land. So we talked a little bit, you spoke about the history, looking at that historical context and who owns the land and who has access to land and who does not have access to land. And what piece does that play in our future? So some of the recommendations that came out of our community food security assessment is that we are now and have started a workforce development program where we're offering culinary arts education. It's a 14-week program where people from the community come, they learn how to become chefs. We set them up with internships. I'm happy to say that the first cohort graduated about 2 months ago, and they all have full-time jobs at the internships that they went to. We're also doing some healthcare provider collaborations. We have started about 2 years ago our fruit and vegetable prescription program. So in collaboration with the Phoenixville Clinic, exciting, right? The Phoenixville Clinic, Community Volunteers in Medicine, the Coatesville VA, very exciting. We have offered close to 300 fruit and vegetable prescriptions in the last year. Offered people an opportunity to get connected through their healthcare provider at the clinic. They then come to the Fresh to You mobile market, sign up with us, and each week they come back and they can get an amount of fruit and vegetables equivalent to the size of their family. So every week they're able to come and get $7, $14, $21, $28 worth of fruit and vegetables. So how do we build that into community that's not just the Fresh to You mobile market, but create an equitable access to this ongoing and long-term for folks? We've also started an advocacy team, really working on promoting SNAP. We worked hard with other collaborators on the Farm Bill this past year. Pretty happy with the outcome. It was slow going, but we got there. We're also looking at a lot of on the local level. Local is where you can really move sometimes the most. Transportation is a big issue in Chester County. How do we work together to make it just a little bit easier and maybe a little less time to get from one place to another? It takes 2 hours to get from Coatesville to Exton, which takes 25 minutes for me to drive. By bus, it's about 2 hours. Can we do better? I think so. I think if we put our heads together, we might be able to do better. Other recommendations: opportunities to purchase affordable, healthy foods, internal nutrition policy that I'll talk to you about in a second, supportive environments in the food pantry, and social engagement opportunities. We're starting a Seed to Supper cooking class, which I'll talk to you about in a second. There's our little Fresh to You mobile market. So this is a little bit of what the market looks like. We have tasted food demonstrations. We have a welcoming environment. People can purchase fresh fruits, vegetables, local honey, and whole grains as well at our mobile market site. We also have a raised bed garden program working with 90 different raised bed garden sites. They donate produce then directly to the pantries or to us, and we get them to the pantries after that, as well as our Seed to Supper program. We're just piloting that this year, working with Master Gardeners Penn State Extension, and we'll be working on that to help people learn how to grow a portion of their own food. But then again, that connection to where to grow food is going to be that key piece. An ongoing collaborative connection and community is very important as well. Eat Fresh cooking classes. So we have a series of hands-on classes, the goals of which are to improve a sense of well-being and connectedness, increase preference for a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, and improve skills. We're not necessarily there to offer nutritional advice. We're there to build community. We're there to help cook and to introduce people to maybe a green they've never tried before. Who's tried mustard greens before in this room? A couple people? Okay. So it's my favorite leafy green. If you've never tried it before, that's my challenge to you this year. Get your hands on some mustard greens and try that out. So these are the types of things, because we do have an agricultural program. We have 2 farmers that grow for us every year at Peace Produce Farm as well as Springton Manor Farm. We are able to grow our own produce, and that's where we're able to get wonderful things like mustard greens and tomatillos and all these wonderful varieties of peppers and other things, and introduce people to the bounty of what we're able to grow. Eat Fresh participants leave every class with a bag filled of fresh produce. We also have our Best Choices program. So this is maybe something similar to Martha's Choice a little bit. So we're able to go into pantries and arrange the pantry to create more of a shopping experience that you might get when you go to the grocery store. So really highlighting fresh fruits and vegetables and sort of putting the breads and the cakes and stuff on on the back shelf. So creating a hospitable, a welcoming environment, offering tasted food demonstrations so that people can maybe not be afraid to grab that bunch of kale if they've never tried it before, because they can taste it and they can see that it is good, and then they can take it home with them. We really follow the healthy eating plate. This is something that Harvard developed, a little different than the My Plate of the USDA, which really focuses on the whole grains, healthy proteins, vegetables, and fruits, a little bit less on the dairy. So this is something that we really have embraced. If you want to know why we don't do the dairy, I'll refer you to our resident RD. But you know, dairy is one of those things, kind of like it depends how you feel about it. So with our nutrition framework, what we're really trying to do is encourage the consumption of fresh vegetables, fruits, whole grains, plant-based proteins, healthy cooking oils, and spices and herbs as well. So this is something that we really felt like we needed to do, and we asked ourselves a few questions. What is a nutrition policy, and why is it a benefit to have one? We started off the Chester County Food Bank saying we're going to make sure that people have the good things. And that's been an ongoing conversation with our local pantries who there has been an historic mindset that has said, we just need to give the people food. You know, we just need to make sure that people have something to take home with that. And while that idea on the surface seems right and seems good, it has negatively contributed to some unhealth in this country. And so we as the Chester County Food Bank believe it is our responsibility to make sure that we give people the best that we possibly can. That all people have a right to not just food, but real healthy food. So, how do we determine what food should be prioritized? What are the action steps to roll out? This is not an easy process. There's some great tools online, which I can tell you about if you're interested in developing a nutrition policy. But what we decided was we really needed a set of guidelines to help optimize our distribution of real healthy foods. We needed a framework, a reference to put these specific foods through and say, does it pass the test? It's not enough to fill empty stomachs. The opposite of being hungry is not being full. It's being healthy. Love that quote. And so why we prioritize real healthy food is that community members are concerned about their diet and their health. People have said, and we see that it's true, that they want access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Food insecure low-income populations are disproportionately burdened with chronic health issues. Nutritious food prevents many chronic health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and so forth. People are asking for healthier foods. One focus group participant said that there's lots of diabetes. It's strong in this area because bread and cake, that's what you're given to eat. That's what's on the shelves in some places. Produce is the most important food item for pantry members. They're the least interested, as I said before, in baked goods. 76% of pantry members want more produce, and 16% of pantry members say healthy food is not important to them. So we adopted this traffic light framework. Some of you may have heard this before. The yellow was the hardest to figure out. The green foods made the most sense to us. Conclusive scientific evidence that foods are beneficial to health. We really wanted it to pass a strong test. So that was clearly fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, dried beans, fish. Fish was really the only that we thought passed the test. Red foods, we'll jump to this one. There's also conclusive scientific evidence that these foods were harmful to your health. So those are things like soda, chips, processed snacks, candy juice, processed red meats, fruits high in sugar, so jelly, cereals, cake mix. We do not take juice, which a lot of people are surprised by. Juice in many cases is just as bad as soda. I drink juice. I add a little bit of water to it sometimes. I'll drink it. And we're not saying that people can't have it. What we're saying is that we're going to do our best to give you the good things so that you can take what's left over, and if you really want to get some juice or some soda, okay, that's your choice. That's really what we're trying to adopt, this idea of we're going to give you the best of what we can possibly give you, the best of what's available. So then the yellow foods, that there's not any clear scientific evidence one way or the other. Not a positive or negative effect on health, or there's just simply not enough information out there for us to have determined answers to that. So, canned fruits and veggies, dairy, eggs, white rice, breads, things like that, a little bit more neutral foods, or things that maybe you can put in to supplement your food and your veggies. Pasta would be a good example of pasta with your vegetables kind of thing. So we have 3 goals with our nutrition framework or our nutrition policy, the Chester County Food Bank. We want to increase the proportion of green foods in distribution. It's not as easy as it sounds. When you've been doing things a certain way, sort of having a plan for 5 years out, how you slowly sort of increase that proportion, and then goal to decrease the proportion of red foods. That's actually much harder. Because we do receive quite a lot of donations. And one of our biggest donations during the course of the year is our peanut butter and jelly food drive. So we usually get to do the peanut butter and jelly food drive, and that's right before summer to make sure the families have enough to so kids can have sandwiches. What we've now started asking is for things a little bit less sugar in the peanut butter, and those peanut butters and jellies cost a bit more. So really trying to get the word out there, and so, with our nutrition framework, this is something that right now is very much of an internal document. It's looking at all of what we do, how we grow our foods, where we purchase our foods, how we ask for donations, and sort of saying, okay, how do we create a 5-year plan to incorporate these goals into them, and then sort of talk to our pantries about them and get them used to it as well, and then making sure that all of our donors understand this. It's a process. It's not something that you want to create and then just, blanket out there. You need to be prepared and have a plan for not only what you're going to do, but why it's important to do this, and what it is and it is not. It is a way for us to know what is coming in and what is going out, and being responsible for the money that we have and the money that we're able to spend. It is not telling people what they can and cannot eat. It is not that. It is saying, here's what we promised you. Here's us promising the best that we can possibly do for those struggling the most. Goal 3 is to improve the nutritional quality of the foods in pantries from sources other than the food bank. So we also have a goal and a promise to make sure our pantries are as supported as they can possibly be from other sources than just the Chester County Food Bank. So a couple things I just wanted to point out to you, things that I've been reading, things that I'm interested in, just to end here for you all this evening. Again, I referenced Closing the Food Gap. He just had another book come out, Stand Together, Starve Alone, which I need to start reading, but sounds pretty phenomenal. Food Apartheid, The Root of the Problem with America's Groceries by Karen Washington. Look up this wonderful blog post. She really talks about how we might want to rethink the use of the term food deserts, because this idea of food desert sort of notes the idea that there's nothing there, that it's barren, right? And the truth is that in most places that we call food deserts, that's really not the truth. There's food everywhere. It just might not be the good stuff. So she really talks about this idea of food apartheid and how we got here and why there are, 60%, I think it's something, I have a quote here, 60% more grocery stores in urban areas and wealthy neighborhoods. Let me read this to you here. This is from Workplace Stability. It's a Bridges Out of Poverty book. Low-income zip codes have 30% more convenience stores, which tend to lack healthy items than middle-income zip codes. 23% of the nation's low-income classes are obese, compared with 16% of middle and upper class. Let's see, here it is. Large supermarket chains abandon less affluent city neighborhoods, focusing instead on the suburbs. There are 3 times as many supermarkets in wealthy neighborhoods as in poor ones. 3 times as many. So, check it out. Food Apartheid. Emergent Strategy, Big Hunger by Andy Fisher is a phenomenal book to sort of understand some of this complexity. Bridges Out of Poverty Framework by Dr. Ruby Payne. And then the Chester County ACEs Coalition, really looking at those connections between adverse childhood experiences, and food insecurity is some of the work that I do as well in Chester County. So I'm really thrilled to be here tonight. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Hopefully you got something out of this. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you all for coming and for listening.
Thank you, Wendy. So now I'd like to introduce our next speakers. Patrick Walsh and Eli Wenger have been managing Martha's Choice Marketplace of Catholic Social Services for the past 3 years. And along with passionate volunteers and a receiving coordinator, they manage the operations of food distribution to over 3,000 different families made up of about 9,000 individuals. And this past year, they received food 900 times a month on average and processed between 65 to 75 pounds a month. And in addition to the Choice Marketplace, they manage Martha's Coop, a cooperative group of 17 families that meet bi-weekly to volunteer and conduct community meetings and access fresh food. The goal of Martha's is to create a food security and build community through creating access to nutritious food and facilitating positive relationships between volunteers, clients, donors, and partners. So please welcome Patrick and Eli.
Thanks so much for having us here. It was really inspiring to hear your open thoughts, Elizabeth, and all the amazing things happening at the Chester County Food Bank. A lot of it mirrors a lot of things that were important to us. So thank you very much.
We've covered a lot of the stats that value a lot.
We have built our county stats.
So Martha's Choice, we are a pantry. So we're we sort of pick up where you leave off to a certain degree, and are directly giving food to folks primarily Montgomery County, Montgomery County, and then primarily Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is probably equivalent to the Coatesville area, Chester County, which is where the bulk of those that aren't able to make ends meet and suffer food insecurity live. So
how many people here are from either Chester or Delaware or Montgomery County? Okay. And so maybe half are coming from outside that area. A lot of the stats that we'll share are made that to do specifically with Montgomery County, and some specifically in Norristown, because that's the bulk of the folks that we serve. In Monco, 1 in 10 families food insecure, and Monco is the second wealthiest county in Pennsylvania. So it's a pervasive problem throughout all of Montgomery County, but specifically large pockets in Norristown and in Pottstown.
So I think you sort of picked up on this, and I think in your introduction you mentioned this. We do two things, or at least we perceive ourselves as doing two things. And the first and the primary thing is we get people food. Our goal is to get them the healthiest food possible, and not so many breads and not, but that's not always the reality. We are often at the mercy of the food we are able to receive. In some cases, we're able to put together great plans, and for example, in the last 2 years through Phil Abundance, who was our, back up a little bit. Phil Abundance acts like Chester County Food Bank. They are a primary source of food, not only directly, but also through the Groceries Against Hunger program, which sorts of, they set up relationships between various grocery stores, and then we make pickups and are able to receive all different kinds of food. In some places, we can get really healthy options. We can get a lot of fresh food and produce, meats, etc. Other places, we're getting desserts, and that's almost all we're getting. And it's nice to be able to serve folks dessert, but It's really not ideal. It's sort of one of those things where if we can get a case of meat from you and we have to take 10 cases of dessert, we'll make that deal. We're not happy about it, but it's the deal that's on the table, so we sort of have to go. But we are actively working, and we'd love to talk to you, better ways, because that is a need, and it really is true that the health decisions that a lot of these folks make are based on growing up and not knowing better, and not knowing different, and choosing things unknowingly that are not as good for them as they could be. And part of our responsibility, we do feel, is to try to give them better options, but we are limited by the options we're able to get.
Well, what we have essentially at Martha's Choice Marketplace, and trying to synthesize all of this fresh food from so many different places and make best use of the state food purchase program funds that we have, and steer food drives in the direction towards health, is a massive food distribution operation, which we try to operate as efficiently and with as much dignity as possible. But at the same time, what we have is a setting where literally thousands of people from all different backgrounds, cross-cultural, cross-race, cross-generational backgrounds are developing relationships with one another. And that's not everybody that walks into the building. We know that a third of our clients come once a year, and that may mean just once ever. A third of our clients are coming seasonally, and then another third are coming every single month. Often the elderly the same month. And we give a little context to that. Our families come once a month. That's the kind of frequency with which people are coming through. And it's about 900 different families coming every month. Cycling through that group of 3,000 that Rebecca had mentioned. And then we've got hundreds of volunteers that are committed to us regularly, and they have the opportunity to engage in some amazing, fruitful work together. A bunch of people who otherwise would not be working together. And so these two opportunities, the chance to meet a basic need, and also the chance to not just shine a light on a startling and urgent crisis, but to cultivate and facilitate actual human relationship, are two opportunities that I think we would like to invest in and build on and expand. And so we hope to share some of those things that we're doing to achieve that.
So we're set up. We're called Martha's Choice Marketplace because we are a choice marketplace. Some of you might already know what that is. For those of you that don't, we're set up like a grocery store. The old days, those that needed it, you came, you got a box of food, whatever was in the box. That's what you got, whether you ate it or not. In some cases, you had families receiving pork that don't eat pork, or lactose intolerant, getting cheese. Great, that's awesome. The idea behind this is you shop each section. We have, I think there's 10 sections. We have a breakfast section, we have a meat section, a dairy section, canned goods, that are vegetables, fruit section, dessert, fresh produce, and soups, a couple others. But the idea is you get to shop through. There are pars according to your family size in English, Spanish, and Arabic. All our signage is in English, Spanish, and Arabic. And you shop through, and you, according to the par of your family size, you pick the items that you want. And so, much like Wendy mentioned, you're not there to tell people what they should or should not have. We're presenting food that is available based on our best abilities, and they get to choose what meets their family's needs the best. Each family leaves with anywhere between 75 and 90 pounds of food per visit. That fluctuates, especially in the summer when we're able to access even more fresh produce, and we're able to kind of give them out in bulk, and so folks can leave with significantly more than maybe in the winter.
Watermelons.
Watermelons or less. Lettuce weighs one thing, watermelon is something else. And that's essentially the basis of what we report is weight. That doesn't necessarily dictate the quality of what we're able to give. 100 pounds of canned goods is not nearly as valuable as 25 pounds of fresh produce in terms of health, but in terms of being able to feed a family, it's more meals maybe. It's a tough kind of line to walk to try and give people fresh options, but also really meet their needs at the same time. And so to that end, that setup allows a lot of relationships to be formed. Back in the day, you had this box, and someone gave you the box, and you received the box. That sets up a power dynamic right off the bat that is difficult to kind of, for both sides, get on board with. One person is the provider, one person is the receiver, and there's an imbalance there that is indicative of a lot of different things in society. The choice marketplace allows for basically folks to just shop through, and we do have volunteers stationed at different sections, but it's dialoguing. It's people kind of walking through, what do I get from here? What do I get 3 from here, 2 from there? Is this good? I don't know. My family likes it, but I don't know. You just start having conversations. People start forming relationships. As a result, a lot of the clients start to become our volunteers. They enjoy the process, so they want to be part of it. They want to help all their neighbors and stuff. And so now you have the volunteers that maybe came from one place, initially, being joined by volunteers that are actual clients, and now you're forming additional relationships. And these, we always talk about how food is the reason why people come to where we are. They wouldn't be here without the food. But the real bread and butter of what we do, I think, comes after the fact. It's building those relationships, and it's creating, or maybe even just removing levels of power and removing levels of status, and it's just people hanging out and getting to know one another. It's that to me is the most powerful aspect of what we provide, and what sort of the choice marketplace allows for, and some of those other things. And building off of that, we've come up with an additional programs that create, more opportunities for community, I think.
Yeah, so we've been looking at that impact and considering, well, what else do we need to prioritize here, and what are the things that are happening, the impact beyond, this particular family got 100 pounds of food on Wednesday. And what we came up with were a couple other programs that we wanted to push forward and test out to try to do this more deliberately, to try to cultivate community, the sharing of resources, and the expansion of understanding and relationships. So one of those things is the Community Coach Program, which the Coach Center is a part of. They have run the whole thing. They spent all of last year bringing together 10 amazing clients of ours who were more than happy to come together and stick through the entire thing and learn how to cook healthy recipes together. And I think that was a beautiful thing, a unique opportunity for this very unique group of, I think they were all women, but that's okay, to come together. And I purposely tried to exclude everybody. But they all came together and had shared such a special bond and time, and walked away with so much more knowledge and so many more resources. There's all kinds of extra benefits to that we had noticed about people carpooling, people sharing meals outside of there, and these are the kind of successes that and impact that have rippled out throughout these different programs.
And now they know how to cook with squash. And that's a real big thing, because
that's a huge thing.
There's
so much squash.
We get in a ton of squash, and people look at it like, what am I supposed to do with this? And we try to tell them, this is how you cook with squash, but unless you grow up cooking with squash, it's an alien life form that don't know what to do with it. And these are, that's exactly what they're doing. They're learning how to cook with ingredients that they're not experienced with, learning how delicious they are, and how to make them for the family. And then now when they see squash, they're like, oh, I can make what you guys said, squash macaroni and cheese, which was delicious. But they would have never known that, and now they do, and squash is a good thing for them. And we're building on that. Because of this, we're building with by having recipes displayed, pictures, which you're also helping with, displayed throughout the pantry, so that when folks see ingredients like this, they can immediately say, "Hey, that's this. That looks delicious. There's the recipe. I can go home and cook that tonight."
And the next step of that is they're sharing this with their friends and other members of the neighborhood about how to cook all these vegetables that are coming to us by the pallet every week that I don't know how to cook either, but they're sharing those recipes with me. I've gotten all of those recipes that filtered to me, so I appreciate that. So that's one thing. There's the Coop, which is our co-op pantry hybrid, in which we have now we have 17 families that come together every other week, and they all chip in $2 every time they come, and they decide, they have a meeting where they decide what they want to do with this pot of money that they amass. That's always an interesting conversation. They've helped out different families that have been going through particularly hard times. They've donated to Laura House. They've donated to a bunch of other organizations in Norristown. But in this situation, you've got a group of 17 families that otherwise would have been, standing outside in a line for the food pantry, coming in and just leaving with their food. But now they're a part of our community. They're trying to decide what to do with a bunch of money that they have. They also, in addition to catching up with each other and supporting one another emotionally, socially, and collectively making decisions about their funds, they also volunteer in food pantries. They help us process these large shipments of kohlrabi or whatever. I don't think they actually got kohlrabi, but large shipments of generally not desirable yet highly nutritious vegetables. And so they'll help us process all of those things, put them into bags, put them on the shelf. And initially, when we first launched the Coop, we weren't too sure that we would be able to process 4,000 pounds of fruits and vegetables in 4 hours. But because of the Coop and because of the frequency of their meetings and how regularly then they were taking on ownership of our operations, we were.
And the really cool thing is so first off, it's every other week, so sometimes they meet as many as 3 times a month, depending on the month.
Right.
Plus they have their monthly shop, which is how we kind of bring. So that allows for meal planning. You're not, when you get produce once a month, especially sometimes the produce that we get, which is literally at the end of its life cycle. So you got to eat that for the next couple of days before it starts going bad. But now they have access to fresh produce 3 to 4 times a month. They can start meal planning. They can start having a long-term game plan, and especially in the Bridges Out of Poverty, one of the things that's which if you haven't read or understood, please do. But one of the things, being able to kind of future orient and plan ahead is a real obstacle if you're living in poverty, and a necessity for long-term health. So that's sort of the crux that you're operating with is trying to balance that. So they get to do that, which is a great thing, but also they're able to process all this produce that now can go to all these other clients that we would not necessarily be able to provide. But because these folks are meeting and doing all this kind of stuff, yes, they're getting more stuff, but they're also allowing us to provide for, the other 800, almost 900 families that we serve that month, fresh produce, on a large scale. So that really works, to their benefit and to the benefit of the whole community. So
it's very exciting to try to share with everybody here some of the new and exciting ways that we're trying to meet this need. But ultimately, these programs, as far as their stated goals, are treating a symptom. We're trying to treat it as intelligently and with as high level of quality as we can, but we're treating a symptom. And we found, as we're doing that, that there's more. And what we found is that one aspect of that formula is found in community. Because hunger is a communal problem. It is a communal failure that we have together. And part of the solution, I believe, is within that community. And Elizabeth mentioned this, and then it came up when Wendy was speaking as well. Somewhere in there is a big part of the solution. And so that's some of the next thoughts that we wanted to share with everybody, because it made us think. So, what are some of the causes of food insecurity? This is what we see every day. People coming into the food pantry, people that look like us, people that don't look like us, people who we can speak to, people who we can't speak to, and that gave us pause to reflect on some of these things. So we thought we might quickly go over what some of the causes of food insecurity are. Does anyone want to offer up some causes of food insecurity?
Throw them out. Come on, anyone. What are some causes of food insecurity? Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's likely the in terms of what we're offering here, like that the fact that the minimum wage is $7.25 and the poverty wage is $7.91. Right there speaks. If you get a raise, you get the poverty rate. All right. The average person working a full-time job at minimum wage is making, that's 40 hours a week over the course of the month, is making approximately $1,257 before taxes. The average rent in Norristown is $11.80. You don't even have enough to make rent. So you get a second job. All right, you're going to make rent. Now you can't get on Medicaid. But you also don't get health insurance. So you can't, no matter sort of what way you turn, you're getting hit by something, and ultimately that leads to the fact that you can't make ends meet, and you need pantries in order to fill that gap.
And one other data point of note is that, according to our most recent survey that we did, and it was about 400 of our clients, 400 households, that a third of them are working, and half of that third are working 2 or more jobs. And the third that are not working and are disabled may be unemployed or between jobs, we're not sure. But a hefty portion of our clients are actively working a full-time job. And one of the most startling things that I had seen was we have a lot of people that come through with a case manager. So they'll come through Central Behavioral Health or any other number of organizations that do case management. So we'll get to know these case managers. They'll come in, bring somebody in, maybe they'll come in the next hour with somebody else. And then they'll come back that night for themselves. So that's like the kind of level of startling inability of full-time work to meet the needs of living in Montgomery County.
Yeah, the cost of living in Montgomery County is incredible. And if you're living in certain parts of Montgomery County, you're probably making enough to make that, but in Norristown you're not. You're struggling every day just to make ends meet, and it's a catch-22 where if you do one thing to better yourself, you sort of lose access to another thing. So you try to do that thing, but now that means you can't, do this. Now Section 8, you're no longer. It's any number of different things, but ultimately, as long as the pay is what it is, no amount of labor is going to allow you, to move beyond that. And it's a frustrating thing because you see people, and this kind of gets to something, like a bigger picture kind of thing, because maybe. I'm not sure about the students over here, how experienced you are in this field, but obviously, many of us in this room understand, just the perception that we see every day when dealing with this versus the national perception of who's coming to our pantries. They're those people. Yeah. They're the people, they don't want to work, they don't want to like they're so easily written off that we don't even have to think about them. They are just the other. And they're not worth our time, they're not worth our efforts, and here, have a little something, that I did, and then you're on your own, I got mine, I'm good, and that's the perception of the people that come to these pantries, and we know firsthand, that's not who comes, that's not who's coming to these pantries, are there some people that have addiction? Yeah, that's absolutely the case, but so much of it is not anywhere near that, but it's so easy to just brand it as just them and then we don't even have to think about it anymore, and we can move on and just collect more for ourselves, and that's kind of as we were talking about, like, we feel like we're treating the symptom of the problem. We're not treating the problem. And very often, I mean, it's our belief, at least on some kind of level, the problem is how we perceive one another. You know, and I don't want to get too hippy-dippy, you know, but we don't see each other as brothers and sisters. You know, we see someone that is different from us, and we very easily label them as an other. You know, and once we put them in that box, we no longer have to think about them anymore. They're whatever bad trait one of them had, they all get. And then we are able to just wipe them off of us and continue with our lives every day. And to me, and imagine, that's, if you're talking about solving any of these issues, all these things that you're doing and that we're doing, we need help in them. We need volunteers. We need food. We need money, you know, so we can buy healthy food because we can't get it a lot of places. But the real change goes beyond treating that symptom. You know, in a perfect world, we don't have a job. We shouldn't have one. It shouldn't be necessary.
Preach it.
So, it's true.
Yes.
And I don't know what you're going to do with that information. You know, I don't know how you change that. But it's really possible. One of the things, like this is what's really cool about where we work, is that we're in this weird spot where we work for the Catholic Church, and there's a lot of Trump-supporting Catholics working alongside us every day. And there's also a lot of social justice warriors working alongside us every day.
Who may also be Catholic.
Who may but they may not. And they all just get along great. Like, it's this weird spot where people from so many different places who, if you put them in any other room, are fighting each other. But in this particular room, they're getting along and getting to know each other and getting to know all the best parts of one another. And it's a really, really cool thing. And so
there's a uniqueness to that. And there is...
for Congress.
What's that?
A good model for Congress.
A good model for Congress. There is a uniqueness to that. And I'm willing to run whatever team building exercises they need. But there's uniqueness to that, and there's an opportunity there. Because as much as the starkness of the ugliness and the violence of poverty and hunger exist, as much as the hate and discontent between different people exists, it's surprising how easy it is to not just coexist with somebody, but to work alongside them fruitfully, to have a exchange of understanding and
a certain vulnerability.
And vulnerability. And these are the things that are essential. And what we found is that whatever that is part of the cure, part of the solution, and definitely a first step to achieving any of the systemic solutions to hunger that there might be. Right? Because I don't have the roadmap. But we're not going to get an increase in the minimum wage without that first step, without being able to put aside the other, and to be willing to experience that. And it sounds like a fluffy thing, but it's not very fluffy, especially when you're engaged in it. And especially our work, I think, in addition to moving food out efficiently, is cultivating this. And I think that whatever effective solutions there will be towards taking those first steps put us in a position where we can solve the systemic issues of paying people for their work and using our land correctly and having local food ecosystems. I don't think we get those things until we take the first step of encountering the other and being open and vulnerable enough to engage in a relationship like that.
You should have your cooking place with those two groups of people instead of the people that are using the food pantry. That's one. But
that's a great thing.
Yeah. But even those two groups of people could be seeing the same thing and still interpret it differently. And we just saw it with the government shutdown, with the perception of these people are making a salary. It's their fault they're going to a food pantry. Why didn't they put enough money aside anticipating that they might need 8 months of income? We're all told that. Put aside 8 months of income as a cushion.
Right.
And I say that because we still blame people in poverty for their poverty.
Yeah.
It's their fault that they lost 2 paychecks and can't survive. It's their fault they don't know how to food shop. Right? So that's still the perception. So,
But what's weird, I mean, because I agree with you, but at the same time, part of that is not to get too overly political, but one of the things they say is socialism doesn't work in non-homogeneous populations. When the people that you're helping look like you, when someone who looks like you and I don't know, follows certain kinds of traditions as you and stuff, it's very easy to see them as part of your growth and to help when they look like that, when they look like them, when they have that belief. That's where you can say, well, they're them, the media does a great job, both sides, of very easily just throwing out a set of values on someone saying they're them. And now you don't have to think about it. Now you can just wipe that off your plate. You don't have to think critically about it anyway, because they're them. Those people are whatever. Whatever kind of assumptions you make about those people, and all the different kinds of those people that exist in the world that aren't you, or at least your tribe in some kind of way. That's what ends up happening. But if those same people would probably argue on behalf of their fellow people to get back wages if they looked like them, if they were them, and that's where this weird thing happens, and that's the beauty of America is all these different people coming together in all sorts of different ways. But it's also one of the challenges is that it are all different people and they are all different ways, and trying to kind of find that commonality. I mean, we talk about this. There's people that you would despise in any other room, and you're at a Phillies game, and someone hits a home run to the bottom line, you turn and hug them like you've never hugged them in your entire life, And in that moment, you are part of the same tribe. In that moment, they're one of you, and you would do anything in the world for them. A week later, you see them somewhere else, but there are those moments where that can happen. But how to sustain that?
We want to cultivate that, and that's what we do. We'd like to do more of that. That's why we have food. That's why we have community notes. That's why we're trying to take these steps forward in that realm to at the same time as we're solving the small problem, the acute problem of we have no healthy food to offer people. First of all, we have hunger, and we also don't have any healthy food that we're offering to people while we're trying to explain to them how to eat in such a way that they're going to have a thriving and healthy life. We're trying to solve that. We're also trying to solve this over here of where we are deeply disconnected and isolated from one another, on top of the fact that we can't even bring ourselves as a community who has conducted the failure of hunger to solve that, to take the systemic steps to solve that. And so what we want to do moving forward is invite everybody to continue to think about opportunities to experience the other in a open and welcome and vulnerable way, because those are the necessary steps. I'd really love to see a farm run by volunteers. We've got a problem that we can't grow food in such a way that's profitable and have a local food ecosystem. But we run a food pantry, and there's hundreds of people willing to come out every single week and put carrots in a bag and put that on a shelf. I would venture to guess that people would be willing to come out and engage in some way in growing some food. And so that's just one example. But what we'd like to impress and leave you with is to imagine ways, certainly imagine ways that you could help us. That would be great. But also to imagine ways in which you can achieve those things that we had mentioned. And ways in which you can achieve that in yourself too. Because all of that has to start with ourselves. But also to be open to imagining and lending yourself to solutions for all these problems with all the different people that are doing amazing work in all of their own communities as well. So that's the bulk of what we had to say.
Three of you to stay in the front. And time for questions. First question here, second question there.
I just want to thank you. I thought that was a really great presentation. I think that the work that both of your organizations are doing is really phenomenal. One question or I guess comment on Martha's Pantry is, you made me think when you were saying that people coming from such different backgrounds can come together for one unique cause. I'm not sure, have you ever heard of conflict cuisine?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Conflict cuisine? No. I just wanted to mention if anyone's interested. It's this really amazing kind of movement that happened. It started at American University, but it's more so based on the differences between war and peace. Does war and conflict cause food insecurity, or does food insecurity cause war and conflict? But there's this really amazing movement that started at American University between Lebanon and Israel and everything that was going along on the borders there during the Syrian conflict. But one of the main things was that they had women from Lebanese background or Israeli background or Syrian background, and they all came together and they were just told to make hummus. And when they first started, none of them were able to speak to one another. They just felt, they felt disconnected. And they came from different cultures, different religions, and they weren't able to connect. But when they started making hummus, they would be like, pass the chickpeas, or do this, or, oh, you do yours that way. I actually mix mine this way. I add a little bit more olive oil, or whatever they were doing. But towards the end of it, they were having full conversations.
That's amazing.
So I thought it was really beautiful, and you should look it up. They've done a lot of different stuff on it. But
now that you say that, I feel like I remember seeing something about that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then I also had another question. You were saying that you thought it might not be possible or profitable, I guess, to have a community garden. But it seems like you have a lot of people who are really interested in coming together for the chef series or whatever you're doing as far as being able to cook healthy meals. If you have such a community engagement, maybe you could develop some type of community CSA program or crop share where different families might actually be interested in having a community garden where they could each have a different part. Instead of having it volunteer run, maybe actually by families who'd be interested in learning how to garden, maybe a sustainable agriculture project. Something like that.
That sounds very exciting. I
talk to him.
I would love to do that. I do think there's huge opportunity there. I mean, people, massive amounts of people wanting to volunteer and lend themselves to that. I mean, they're willing to do it in a food pantry, which carries its own stigmas and things. I feel like a garden would be all the more exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a question in the back.
Yes, hi. My name is Anita Salucci. I'm a registered dietitian. And I just want to first of all thank you all for your presentations. Very interesting, working on that. And I actually work in East Martin at Suburban Community Hospital, so I'd be very interested in volunteering.
Hey! Come on down.
Yeah, I mean, my clients were desperate I had a lot of clients that are discharged or homeless. I mean, they definitely need access to food.
Yeah.
And so I would love to just volunteer, just to get hands on, because I did this Main Street Manna or another dietitian activity, and I loved it. So I like the camaraderie, like you're saying, it sounds like, it's just spiritual, like there's really working with people and clients, and that's what it's all about. And so
please.
Yeah, man, we'd love to have you. Maybe we can work out a more systemic way of helping people out if you're adding money.
I have hands-on, I could bring back to the clients and, because they gotta run, whatever. I mean, I like to be on there, but now it's, like, this is a problem, and I see the malnutrition, and, so, like, yeah, I would love to give my time, just do service, and I thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question back there and then here.
Hi, I'm Amy Wish, I'm a nurse with the Pennsylvania Chapter American Academy of Pediatrics. And there's, just knowing that there are a lot of healthcare people here, I wanted to just sort of add one thing, which is that since 2015, the National American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended 2 screening questions and for food insecurity, and more healthcare sites are using those 2 screening questions, and there's a lot of education going on about that they should be done universally, routinely, sensitively, confidentially, and all these other ways to make sure you really, because as we talked about, there can be a lot of reasons why people might not want to disclose that they are food insecure. And one of those, and I know documentation and citizenship were mentioned, but another one is that people are afraid that they'll be referred to Child Protective Services. And so that's another sort of thing just in terms of the healthcare people here. And then I just wanted to mention one interesting project that we have going on now, which is around oral health and food pantries. And doing work with food pantries around connecting the oral health needs and also doing like toothbrush drives and toothpaste drives and having that be part of the sort of health community wellness, aspect because there's more and more education and public awareness about the importance of oral health, and yet it's so often not included in healthcare plans and what people think about, and it can have such long-range impacts, especially when talking about seniors, children, everybody at dinner. Sex in lots of different ways with this. So that may be something that food pantries would be interested in getting.
We do? Okay.
No, absolutely. We do sometimes get donations of that sort. We haven't identified specifically oral health. I mean, that would be food drives, donors. They do like very super specific things like that. So that may be a great idea of a detailed ask towards that end.
Program that can link up.
I have a quick question for you, just something that had popped out as we were doing some of our preparation for this, and we were going over a recent survey that we did. Found 36 kids with no health care, and I'm imagining those are undocumented immigrants. Did you have any idea about the way health care is delivered to undocumented children?
Public health departments are sort of a provider of last resort for many people. And I don't mean to put that in a pejorative way because they provide excellent health care. But it's a problem. And not only, part of it is that people are afraid it's going to be a problem to lead to other issues, whereas in reality it wouldn't, because that idea, people aren't in most healthcare settings actually screened for citizenship, so or legal residence or anything like that. But
thank you.
Certainly the public health department, Chester County, and Montgomery County, they're both excellent and do provide a full range of clinical, including dental services.
Amy, you have your hand up next.
So one of the things that I was thinking of that I hadn't really thought of before, and I feel kind of embarrassed that I haven't even thought of it before, but when you talk about food insecurity, what I'm seeing more and more with my pregnant women, and we have a whole spectrum of, I take care of pregnant women that come from all over the city and Montgomery County, and one of the biggest risk factors for food insecurity is that they have a real issue about, number one, pay for maternity leave because they fall into the FMLA, and childcare costs. So the cost of going back to work and childcare and all. So I start to see this trend during the prenatal care period where the anxiety starts to creep up when they get into the third trimester of, oh my gosh, now I'm looking at childcare. Oh my gosh, some of them have only been at their job for a period of time. Some are not full time. Some don't, the FMLA is not. So I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I connect that? And that's not something that we talk about a lot in that area. And we're seeing such rising rates of gestational diabetes, which, has to do with obesity, which could go back to the whole other issue. But I think that that's something that, as healthcare providers, I can do a better job. I know that with all the work that we've been doing with all of you, because I take the students, Elizabeth takes the students to the Chester site, Kathy Reynolds takes the students to the Chester site, and I work at the Norristown site with the students, with Patrick and Eli and the Cope Center. And one of the things that I'm trying to do a much better job of is connecting how important it is for the students that when they take care of patients in the hospital, it's not only about what's happening in their medical issues and the social service issues, that hospitals are now partnering with food programs, and I try to use, our relationship, and I think how important it is of them to go into these community-based programs and to experience and understand of what stigma is about that other. Because a lot of our students, in reality, have never been exposed to that. I mean, in all honesty. And talking to them about, in your lifetime and generation as a student now, going into the workforce, you will see a change and a shift that your healthcare institution is going to partner with agencies to address food issues, farms and things like that. Do you agree, Elizabeth?
Well, I think the experience for the students partnering this, like you're talking about the other, is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the learning not to tell people what they can eat or can't eat. It's to empower someone, first of all, to be able to make the healthiest meals out of what they have access to. That's the other piece.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I worked for the Navajo Nation quite a few years ago as a public health nurse, a community health nurse, and they had a program where a woman that was Navajo, she's diabetic, and she was part of the public health department, and she would make appointments and go into, I lived in a very rural area where I was working, go into people's homes and teach them not how to cook different foods, but how to cook their traditional foods in a traditional way, as opposed to an unhealthy way. So it might still not have been the best food choices, but it was cooking it in a healthier way. And it had a tremendous impact on health outcomes, on the diabetic rates in particular. So, I know you were talking about how you might not always have the healthiest food choices, but you can still cook even what we consider unhealthy food. You can prepare it in a healthier way or eating smaller amounts.
And I just have one more comment about changing behaviors. My husband grew up eating 2 lunch meat sandwiches a day. He is still eating 2 lunch meat sandwiches a day at lunch. So and that's fine because, he eats other things that are healthy. But that's what he ate in school and in high school and in college, and you can't change certain things.
I think you just have to trick people sometimes. There's a woman I know who started using cauliflower rice. And she makes it, and her husband has no idea.
The same rice for the last year, and it's all cauliflower.
Okay.
No clue. She said, I would never tell them.
If you have any advice on lunch?
She's facing the food. She did
Any other? 1 and 2.
I apologize, this isn't a question, but first of all, thank you guys again so much for being here. I think what you're doing is incredible. like the community development that the community you're impacting is really phenomenal. This is more just like a sharing of like just speaking to the community development that you've been doing. When I was in Scotland for like a program, and I remember I was talking with, we were hearing a presentation from the former chief medical officer of Scotland, and he was telling us about this thing called the Glasgow effect. And it's essentially that they found this study where, like within like a 50-mile radius, in a 50-mile radius, there was a 14-year age expectancy difference in communities. So people were living 64 in one community and then like 80-something in another. And they were like, wow, that's astounding because that's a vast difference for age expectancy, like in a really small area. So they started looking and they found out that it didn't have to do with drugs or alcohol levels, it didn't have to do with income necessarily directly, but what they did find was that children born in really stressful environments, so like often like a food insecure environment, or one where like your parents are working 2-3 jobs to pay your bills and stay above the poverty line. The children, when they would cry, were held by the mother quite enough when they were younger, and it caused like anatomical, like physiological, like misfirings of, as well as technical terminology. I'm a business student. But I guess that ultimately the long-term effect was these children they would grow up to be higher risk of risky behavior, higher risk of violent tendencies, and higher rates of dropping out of school. And it became a systematic and like long-term impact on the community that ultimately led to these extremely low life expectancy rates. And so they tried to figure out how to fix it. And they looked at what, I think it was what Nixon did in like, the U.S., where they would go and give like direct cash subsidies to people. They didn't really know how to like, handle poverty and hunger issues, and like they're still trying to figure it out. Ultimately, what the chief medical officer, which blew my mind, that it wasn't a medical fix, it wasn't like a shot of any kind that ultimately like would reverse the effects, but they found that it was wellness and friendship. And he says, I know it sounds silly, and it's exactly what you said, like it sounds kind of fluffy to say, but it was the wellness and friendship of these people when they got out of their houses, when they were engaged in their community, when they were working in like a community garden together, things like that. It up until the age of 80 allowed them to, which again, I'm sorry, I don't know this, but he said it, so I believed it. Allowed them to like reverse the biological effects and can have the higher life expectancies and like crime rates dropped and all these really great societal benefits. So the work that you're doing clearly, like, I might have effects you don't even know. So.
Absolutely.
That's really awesome. I gotta look into that. I heard from elsewhere about positive social connections being the number one indicator for healing trauma, and also social mobility. That's amazing.
Another question here. I came in late, so I apologize if this was touched on before I came, but I am a biology student, and climate change and the environment has been something really big that I've studied since I've been here at Villanova. I'm wondering if, and do you have any thoughts on how climate change may impact food security? Yeah.
This is one of these questions I would love if my husband were here. He's a farmer. He's been farming for a long time. He works for a nonprofit called Trellis, and he firmly believes, and I have a suspicion this might be true as well, that it's going to get pretty rough. I don't know that that'll happen in some of our lifetimes, but I have a suspicion that some of the younger people in this room might see some really hard times. I mean, just to give an example, just this past year, our raised bed garden program, which typically grows about 40 to 45,000 pounds of food between all the gardeners, grew less than 30,000 pounds. Now it was a bad year, right? We had a lot of rain, not enough sun. If we keep seeing trends like this, we're going to end up growing a lot less food. So I believe that we need to teach ourselves how to grow food. We need to learn how to do that as best as we possibly can in every community that we can. Again, coming back to how important it is that all people have access to land. And that's really hard when it becomes, when you're unable to grow in certain places that you've always been able to grow in, and now there's a finite amount of land that gets the right sun, the right amount of rain, the right temperatures all at the same time of year, then we may see some struggle over land in this country that we've not seen before, and in other parts of the world as well. So I don't know that I can see any good coming from climate change. I am a believer that it is happening, and it's happening quicker than we expected that it would. And we have to, Patrick and Eli said it so well, choose to see one another as ourselves. Choose to when things get hard, open up the door instead of close it and say, this is mine, you can't step on my land. So to answer your question, sorry it was kind of long, but I think it could get worse. I don't know what that could look like, but people better get ready to learn how to grow some stuff. And make friends with your neighbors and invite people. And if you've got access, invite others to have access. That's what I would say. Sorry.
One last question. There you go.
Just something I find interesting, when you go to a doctor's office or a hospital, and I can only speak as a woman since I am one, that they'll say, do you feel safe at home? Okay? When someone registers in our school on our registration packet, it asks if you have a housing issue. But nobody, and just because you have health insurance doesn't mean that you have food in your refrigerator.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asks, do you need help with food?
Yeah. And
instead of asking, it's a good thing to ask, do you feel safe? I kind of found it funny when one of my doctors who I've had for 20 years started asking me that, and I looked at him and I'm like, what? He says, I'm sorry, we have to ask that now. It's like, okay. But nobody has ever asked. Growing up, I grew up on welfare. You couldn't look at me and know that. Nobody ever asked, do you need help with food? And maybe that's something our medical industry could start doing instead of just saying, do you feel safe at home? And even our schools, like I work in the school system. Ask that question, and it's a question on the registration packet. Nobody outside of a few people see it, but then it can get to who might be able to help you because you don't know who to go to.
Yeah. You touched on this, right? Is it Karen? I'm sorry, what's your name? Amy, I'm sorry. Yeah, that they're decent. Would you mind saying those two food insecurity questions?
I don't have them in my fingers.
Okay. And then you have our clinics.
The American Academy of Pediatrics has distilled down this 18-item food security assessment down to two questions that we found to 97% of the time correctly identify food insecurity. And they are being used more and more in pediatric family medicine and other primary care settings. But then the issue becomes, and part of what I'm working on is what do you do when someone screens positively?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's sort of the part two of it. And but yeah, so it is, and as other people, I think other Amy there was talking about, more and more hospitals and healthcare sites do recognize food insecurity and the related health issues as, food insecurity underlying many, many health problems and being often the least invasive, least expensive, and, just best way to address what may be presenting as clinical problems, including, behavioral health, mental health.
That's exactly right, yes. That's wonderful. So, you go to the doctor a lot, and people go to the doctor, and often if their health is not doing well, for the two things they tell them to do, right? You need to eat better, you need to exercise. But if you don't have access to those things, then you're sort of stuck. And so a lot of our clinics, our partner clinics, Community Volunteers in Medicine, La Comunidad Hispana, and there's great clinics in our region that do ask those screening questions. Sort of talk about eating healthier, and then ask you, do you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables? And then they are prepared to give them a document that basically has all the pantries in the region, as well as all the hot meal sites in the region. So here you go, connect up with the Chester County Food Bank, connect up with this pantry. Still trying to get our hospitals to do it. It's a process.
It's nice if our schools did it, because I know in our school when we find somebody, our social worker finds somebody. We now have a food pantry in our area, and we can refer them, and it's going well.
Yeah.
We're very new.
Okay, I have an announcement that we promised to make. There's a program at Villanova called the Nook. We have students whom we know are feeling insecure, and this is an opportunity in the Connolly Center or in the Student Health Services ground floor right by our building. There are drop-offs for very simple food items, cup noodles, canned meat, easy things to eat, but also basic hygiene items. I remembered it when you talk about toothbrushes. And students are able to come very discreetly and get things that they need. It is being used, so I wanted to remember to say that. Are there any more housekeeping details? No. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.